Hello and welcome to the Capital Call, Episode 7. I'm Quinn Millegan.
And I'm Drew Millegan.
And today we've got a special guest, Dr. Nicholas Wu, a professional in the Army, longtime friend of ours. How are you?
I'm doing great. I was told I was paid $12,000 a year.
So that number keeps getting higher.
It does.
So, Nick, you're in the Army down in El Paso. You've been there a while. What rank do you have now? Are you a general?
I wish I was. No, I am a captain.
Commander-in-Chief.
You know, I'm not supposed to comment on the commander-in-chief under any official capacity. But no, I am the rank of captain. It's the third rank in the commissioned officers. So you start out as a lieutenant at the very bottom, and then depending on where you end up, you kind of keep going up. So captain is the third rank above second lieutenant and first lieutenant.
Okay.
What's the Surgeon General? Is he the general?
I don't actually know. Surgeon General is usually just appointed by the whatever administration just to technically be in charge of that whole thing. They're not in charge of me, though. Well, they are, kind of. There's multiple routes of authority I answer to.
You have 5 different bosses, right?
Pretty much, because I'm in a residency too. So my immediate people that I answer to are my program. So I have a chief resident, a program director above them who kind of tell me what to do as a medical resident. Within the actual Army itself, I'm part of a special group called Student Detachment at the hospital where residents, training nurses, anyone who's kind of part of that, we're there for training specifically. We're under their command. But then that group, then they are overseen by the actual officers in charge of the hospital itself. So, typically lieutenant colonels and stuff. And then the actual above that, there's a hierarchy that's a little fuzzy. So in terms of the graduate education, they have their own hierarchy. In terms of who signs my paychecks, there's that hierarchy. And then who tells me what to do, there's a different hierarchy.
So you have several different people actually signing your paychecks.
I mean, as far as that's the gist I get, because in the end, whoever writes the orders is who I listen to. But most of the orders are just go here, and then these people share you.
So what I'm getting out of this is you were, in fact, on the Signal group chat with Pete Hegseth?
Oh, of course. Can't you tell? I was the one putting the eggplant emojis in there and be like, this is a bad idea.
Well, we will have some questions for you a bit later. And I wanted to let all the listeners and viewers know that we have some interesting content for our segment at the end, This Day in Economic History. It'll make you feel a little bit better about whatever financial mistakes you made this week. And we're talking about May 15th, May 16th, some collapses, some comebacks, and at least one very polite Canadian uprising. So stick around for the end.
Those Canadians can be ruthless when they want to be.
So there's been a lot that's been happening, as does every week, right? And I figured I'd start with Foot Locker. Skyrocketed over 80% after a merger announcement. Unexpected, they're merging with Dick's Sporting Goods. So that was kind of interesting. Foot Locker did actually, it comes up in our value screen from time to time, but the problem is that we had with their business model is they don't have anything proprietary and it's easy to put them out of business.
Yeah, they were always very asset rich, but short on potential growth opportunities and long on potential conflict and competition opportunities, which always made them somewhat of a risky play if you were looking for a good value investment. What I do find interesting is the takeover price is roughly where we were looking at them before and did not buy. So apparently Dick's decided to buy where we decided not to. But it's still a huge move compared to where they were. I mean, they were at $12 and they're up around 21 last I checked. It's a pretty decent return if you were in there and had that $11, $12 purchase price.
When was the last time? Have you guys ever been to a Foot Locker recently?
Good Lord, no.
I think the last time I was at a Foot Locker was 12 years ago.
I get usually most of my shoes either at Dick's or Big Five just because, looking for some sort of just standard tennis shoes or hiking stuff. Or it's at some dirt cheap Payless shoe store before they went out of business where you just get 6 pairs of shoes for $20 and just raid the store because there ain't nothing left going on.
Hell yeah.
I've never been to Foot Locker, I think.
Where does what brand of shoe does the Army issue? I'm assuming they give you Army issue boots at some point.
So I don't know about how the enlisted do their more standard process. For me, it was here is your shopping list of stuff for your uniform. And the boots, there's a store on most military bases and installations where it's here is the boots section. It's just rows and rows of boots you can choose from to work, and whatever one works for you, you pick it, and that's that's what you should got. And you still got to pay for your own boots. You got to pay for
You
your
gotta
entire uniform.
pay for them yourself. So it's like a company store then. Do they have different kinds of boots, or are they all the same but different sizes?
There's just different like companies. They all have different brands and stuff. And I have 2 sets of boots from 2 different companies, and they actually do feel different. And so I have my primary pair, which is very comfortable, and I have my secondary pair, which is there in case the primary pair gets trashed or it's messed up. They don't feel the same though. I feel like they are different enough, but I do have the one I like more.
Okay. Are they the ones that come with you if you get shipped out to a near combat zone? I'm assuming you wouldn't get sent to an actual combat zone unless many things had gone wrong.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the military doctors, they're nearer the line than you think. Now, granted, they're not like necessarily at the line doing like, like just sitting there, like running an IV on the patient, unless you have to. For the most part, the line is, people get injured, get to that first part. All right, this guy's okay, or oh, this guy's in bad shape. We got to keep pushing him up to kind of get to the right place. Doctors, whatever reality of the next war is going to be, we're not as far away from the front as you think. Just because you need someone there to like get them all patched up. Now, how it's gonna work if we go to war with Russia or China, I don't know what that's actually gonna look like, but we're not all just sitting completely in the back, just like smoking cigarettes and waiting for guys to come in there with like legs blown off. We're a lot closer than we understand.
I didn't realize they still issued cigarettes with your standard care packages in the Army.
No, they don't. Nowadays, kids are, nowadays people have like Zyn packs and stuff. But no, they do not issue that for us. Most people just bring them.
What's your opinion of Zyns? Are you allowed to give a medical opinion of Zyns?
I mean, I haven't used them, so I don't really have any opinion. I don't 100% know what they are beyond just nicotine packs. You don't necessarily chew them, you just stick them like on your gums, right?
I think so. They're like a little bit less disgusting version of what do they call it? Chewing tobacco.
Chewing tobacco, yeah.
Yeah.
Then I mean, yeah, I guess it's just chewing tobacco with less chewing. I mean, it's tobacco. It doesn't really matter how you get it. It's still going to cause problems. If it's not tobacco and it's just nicotine, then I don't know. I really don't know beyond probably has, a similar risk for oral cancers, but actually using it, like, it's definitely better than cigarettes, I'll say that, but that's a pretty low bar.
I suppose you're not burning it.
Mm-hmm.
Another item I wanted to bring up is there's been a lot of goings on in the Middle East. There was a Saudi U.S. investment conference. Apparently, we've secured $600 billion in investment commitment from Saudi Arabia, allegedly, which I believe that includes that Boeing order that's like the historic largest Boeing order ever.
Boeing didn't move on that news, by the way, so I'm not
it
sure
was
the
up
market
like
believes it.
It came out and it was up like 0.6%. Even if they get it, I don't know if they can fulfill it.
Yeah. The fundamental problem with Boeing right now is not orders. It's capacity to actually produce what they have already committed themselves to. Boeing, ever since that McDonnell-Douglas merger, has just been having more and more operational problems. They tried moving to Chicago first, and they tried moving to the Carolinas. And the further their production facilities got from their management, the worse the production problems got. I don't think an order to Saudi Arabia is going to change that.
I mean, that merger you guys talked about, was that before or after they started decreasing like union workshop employees?
That was before, to a degree. I'm not exactly clear on the timeline as to exactly when it started. I just know that when they moved away from Seattle, which would have been those union shops, was post-merger.
Okay.
Sort of an attempt to get closer to their management.
It was in 1996. Wait,
Yep.
no. Okay, yeah. Douglas merged with McDonnell in 67, and then between 96 and 97, they merged with Boeing.
All right. As someone who has no idea about the finances, I wouldn't trust myself on a Boeing plane nowadays.
You heard it? That's your official medical diagnosis of the planes?
I mean, when you hear not just like, when you hear that like they're using freaking like dish soap and stuff and like small scrap to try and like keep the planes getting out of production on time, and their oversight is being brushed away just to kind of make sure they meet the deliveries. Like it makes me afraid to get on the plane.
Yeah.
Now, Is that plane gonna crash? Probably not. But like, if the plane crashes, it's like a near 100% death. So
Yeah.
like a 0.1% chance of dying, it's still dying.
It is. It's very interesting looking at the actual fatality rates of planes because they've just gotten safer and safer over the decades, especially big planes. Like the 737s are actually, even with their current track record, the 737 Maxes are safer than most planes, I would say, that were out in, say, like the 70s or the 80s. But A quick story of our personal connection to Boeing. I don't believe we've ever publicly recorded this, put out a statement on this, but we actually have some experience trading Boeing. If you remember when those two crashes happened, the one in Indonesia and the one in, I believe it was Kenya, it was somewhere in Africa, we actually had taken in a short position against Boeing just prior to those accidents. It wasn't because we knew anything. It wasn't because we, thought people were going to die, but we did.
And we did not crash the planes.
Right. We did not crash the planes. What we had assessed was that Boeing was trading a little bit too rich. It's one of those classic companies that's used as an example of a duopoly or a monopoly in Econ 101, and we had assessed that it was being assigned far too high of a multiple for its actual efficiency as a company. In a sense, we kind of, when you take a position like that, you don't necessarily know what news is going to come out. You just know that they need to essentially run a marathon just to run in place. So it could have been anything that actually happened. Did I feel a little bit conflicted about making money on the deaths of a few hundred people indirectly? Maybe, but it happened. The price went down post that, and it was to a large degree Boeing's own fault for having done that. Mismanaged the plane software.
It was that stretched rubber band, overvalued. It snaps back to reality. That reminds me, and Drew hates this show. I don't know if you watch it all, but Nick, Nathan Fielder? Oh yeah, his new show, The Rehearsal, is out. And have you guys seen that at all?
I have not. No.
I've seen clips.
He, his old show, Nathan For You, he's doing dumb business ideas. This new one, he basically starts by saying, HBO gave me a blank check, and one caveat is it has to be kind of entertaining. And he starts by questioning the aviation industry and trying to solve plane crashes by reenacting black box scenarios. It's actually really interesting.
Wait, what do you mean, reenacting black box? What?
Without giving away too much, the whole point of the show, it's kind of a ridiculous premise where he thinks that you can improve real life scenarios by recreating it in its entirety. So the first season, it would be something dumb like, I want to get the job. And so he recreates the entire building and everybody in it and has people, actors and whatnot, in a warehouse. And you just keep redoing the same interview over and over again till you get the job. And then you go and do it. But with the aviation thing, he's recreating the cockpit with basically virtual reality, and they have the scripts of the black box of planes that went down to try to analyze what went wrong.
And does that yield any useful information, or is it... Nathan Fielder is known for his kind of surrealist comedy.
Well, here's the thing, though. The thing that they were noticing is that the first officer in planes that went down would never question the captain, even though their role is to sometimes assume control when they believe the captain is not doing something correct.
Okay. Is there any pattern to the black boxes he pulled from, or are they all just random recordings and stuff?
Well, I won't get into the rabbit hole. I'm just saying it's a really interesting premise. You got to watch it.
You got me hooked. You can't just just walking away God, you asshole.
You got to describe the whole episode in detail now before we can move on, Quinn.
Exactly. No, essentially he does.
Jamie, put that clip up. Goddamn.
Put the clip up, Jamie. Well, what he finds out
episode
is that part of it is the captain and the co-pilot basically don't say a word to each other before they meet and fly the plane together. And the captains basically have a power trip where they always think they're right, and the co-pilot thinks they can't question them. But in cases where there were survivors, the co-pilot questioned the captain's authority and actually spoke to one another.
And so it's a communication issue.
When you say question authority, are you as simple as, hey, you sure about this? Or a full on I don't know, that sounds like a dumb idea?
Both. There's this guy, Sully Sullenberger. Do you remember him? The
one they made the movie about, the guy that crashed into the Hudson?
Yeah, he has this crazy assumption about what happened in the second. There's 23 seconds of silence where he does something and they don't know what. Anyways, you gotta watch the show. I'm telling you, it's good.
I'm guessing he's just probably they probably just stood there staring and they didn't know what to say. It was so stupid.
No, it's even more convoluted than that.
Oh.
Direction or the other, and the plane just did a nosedive.
Oh, God.
On that note, another item I wanted to bring up was, and this is a big deal, is obviously the market is reacting quite positively to the slash of U.S.-China tariffs the 90-day pause.
Now, we should clarify that the market is up compared to what it was before, Liberation Day in some cases. However, if you go to its January and even November highs, most averages are still down quite precipitously. The Russell itself is down from a high in November by about 15%. And the Dow and the S&P are doing better. They're only down 5 and 4% respectively from their highs, but it's still not quite recovered. Essentially what you've seen is a discounting of growth in 2025 as a result of the tariffs that are still in place. 10% is nothing to sniff at.
I mean, I'm looking at my own like Fidelity, just a general aggressive mutual fund. I can visually see when Liberation Day happened, because it just you just go down. It sounds like the slope at which things are starting to recover from the investments it has a steeper slope than it was before, and it looks like it might actually get back on track for what my initial, like, at least the initial trend line I had before everything was going on. So maybe the people working my accounts know what they're doing.
Maybe.
And another thing that people forget to take into account is the lost growth opportunity through this period too.
Although this is a golden opportunity. I mean, Nick is not a financial professional. If we could get a view of how he views his investments, I mean, how often have you really been checking your investment through this period? Is it daily, weekly, monthly?
I mean, I don't check it like that closely, because in the end, I don't think I'm going to do anything with it. Just because I'm not the one I just have my account it's my money, but it's just a mutual fund. I have some dude paid to like take care of it for me and like just have money in there eventually when I take it out. In terms of like, was I ever worried about like all this stuff? Not really, because I'm not a short-term like investor. I'm not looking to like every quarter get like some bump up. Like, this is just there for me to put money in and just look back eventually, oh, there's a shit ton of money here. All right, let me use it. Not like I need to make this much by this monthly period. I need to pull out the stops and meet this kind of quota. I don't care about that. I have a consistent like salary through the Army. I have money. I have I have like a crazy matched pension of like up to 5% of my income through the Army and all that stuff. For like all this stuff. Like, for me, the mutual fund itself is just like, it's extra money that I'm putting there because I'm probably not going to spend this. I might as well just put some stuff here and just have a nest egg for more money later.
Nick, I think you're already doing better than about 90% of people when it comes to investing. And you're definitely doing better than a lot of Army folks. I hear a lot of stories of even lower level like recruits getting their payments and realizing they're not spending on room and board and immediately going out and buying like a Mustang or something like that and getting into debt immediately. So
yeah, that's pretty common.
You met some people that have done that?
I mean, you could just go onto a base. Like, it's meme because it's real. Like, you go onto a base, you see these nice souped up cars, and it's like, this idiot bought something because he finally has a steady paycheck. When in reality, like, as an officer, if you're in charge of something, like, one of the things they actually did tell us, even though I didn't get a lot of like the real officer training that a lot of like rest of the Army officers go through. But one of the things they did say was, hey, when it comes to finances for your guys' troops, you got to make sure you kind of like keep them in line. That if they go out there buy a bunch of like crazy stuff, you probably got to make sure that like they know what they're doing, because otherwise they're just going to get in debt. They're going to do some stupid shit in the Army to try and make up for it, like start stealing shit or selling secrets.
Now, do they actually give people financial training in the Army? Is there any like class they give them saying like, don't do these basic mistakes?
I don't know about the rest of the Army, because medical command is it has a very different setup for us.
So I came totally separate.
I came in through the Health Profession Scholarship Program, and with it, their main thing is, we just need doctors in here. We don't need you to be out there like commanding troops and all this stuff. We need a doctor in here, or we need a medical officer here to do their job. When it came to like any of the finance stuff, it was only in a brief like section about like, all right, as an officer and finance stuff, make sure you keep everyone in line. Make sure like, hey, you should counsel them if they're having money problems, and there's like a bunch of different programs and stuff available if like your soldiers are having this. Or there are ways to like, hey, if you want this advanced on your money, sure, just show me all your stuff. And like, there's ways to kind of make sure that they're keeping it straight. As a doctor, no, there hasn't been any.
Yeah.
Just because, again, it's important, but it's also, think of it like this. It's not something you're tested on, and that would affect your license. It's important, but it's the same way like how taxes are important. Like it's not necessarily something that your job requires, but it's something you always have to do. We did have more informal training kind of part. We had someone who actually did like have a lot more financial experience. She's already out of the Army, and she was able to reflect and like, oh, here's some stuff I did. And she was actually just very modest, like, look, you don't do anything crazy. Again, set up your retirement fund. Make sure you're putting a little money away each month and everything. She kind of did the whole Dave Ramsey side of things, where it really is just, again, of all the advice he gives, she mainly stuck to the ones that were pretty solid of his, which is like try and nestle money away, try and commit to this much. That way you like always have a consistent amount of savings, a consistent amount of investment. And she didn't go further into that because it's also Dave Ramsey, and sometimes he just goes a little Dave Ramsey.
Yeah, he's like, he brings someone on. Are you telling me you and your wife both collectively make $1 million a year, and you guys are $3,000 in debt? That's irresponsible.
Why the hell you got that? Oh my God.
It makes for great
You're killing
clips. He shows up in my feed every once in a while, and it's like, yeah, I watched this.
I mean, again,
Well, that's interesting that you mentioned that in the medical counseling, you did mention that they do a little bit of financial counseling, because I'm assuming that can be a source of stress for anybody. I mean, I'm assuming it can lead to some psychological problems occasionally.
I want to say yes in general for doctors, but for the Army doctors specifically, part of the scholarship agreement is, yeah, the Army will pay for all of medical school. And that is the largest chunk of debt next to owning a house. So my medical school with interest is calculated at around $450,000 to $500,000 worth of debt, compared to like standard undergrad, which is what that ranges from $32,000 to $90,000 on average across a 4-year degree. Again, I'm just pulling those numbers right out of my butt, but the actual medical one, that's real.
And you basically got that degree all paid for by going through the Army, so you have no debt, right? At
I
least not
have
from
no,
that.
I have no financial debt. I still owe the debt itself of service time to the Army, which is 4 years, calculated out at this point. And because of that, I'm going to be able to leave the Army with either no debt, because, at that point, like, or a very little debt. The Army wage for a doctor is not as much as a equal civilian counterpart, but I don't have to pay for malpractice. I don't have to pay for a lot of things because the Army covers it. It's also consistent income. It's a salary. It's not, I don't have to pick up an extra shift here or there to kind of make up the money. And every doctor is actually paid a little bit differently based on specialty. But, at the end of my 4 years, I will be making on average about $10,000 a month after taxes, which, compared to a doctor on the outside, which is closer to be like $20,000 a month, maybe $30,000 a month. But there's a lot of crap I don't have to deal with, because sure, someone may make $20,000, $30,000, but how much of that is going to their loan repayment? How much is going to that new house that they got? How much is going to that malpractice insurance they got to pay for? How much is going? And you start seeing like it get pared down, where there's still a difference, a significant difference, but is it a difference that becomes as significant as the numbers really show?
Plus, you get VA lending rates too if you do buy that house.
Don't talk about that.
Do get a lot of benefits.
Yes.
The Army has its ways of incentivizing you.
If you were discharged, would you owe for your medical education?
I don't know the answer to that question, because I don't know anyone who's gone through that to really be sure. Like if you were being discharged out of the military for their stupid stuff that they're saying policy wise, I am 100% certain that they will. I don't think they're going to have to owe back any time or money, because this is just how it is. Leave, but this is like, we're not going to ask you for anything else. Whereas like if I try to do that and there was no if I was dishonorably discharged or for something stupid, I don't know. I feel like if I was dishonorably discharged, I would probably not owe back time, because I'd have a lot more problems after that. If I was honorably discharged, I don't know. Medically discharged, again, I don't know, because if you're medically discharged, that means like something happened here that we can't use you anymore in the Army, and I don't necessarily think they would tack on time. And even then, if they're thinking about someone getting medically discharged, it's a lot easier, instead of discharging them, just to like put them in a place where they can serve out their time, get some use out of them, and then get them out.
Yeah.
Interesting.
That makes sense.
I actually am aware of what they do for a medical discharge. I won't say who it is, but we do actually know somebody, Quinn and I, that was medically discharged. He wasn't a doctor, but he kept his full Army pension when he left.
He was in there for he signed multiple contracts. I think he just stopped from his like the current contract.
That would make sense.
You know, one thing that I might ask for your opinion on this, Nick, in the medical field, and this just came out, today, I think? UnitedHealthcare, the one where the CEO was shot, allegedly.
Allegedly.
I don't know. He seems pretty freaking dead to me.
He got shot in the back on camera.
Hey, man, what
the hell have you
It was
been
a dark
smoking?
day. You never know what really happened. Somebody could have dropped a penny off of the skyscraper he was walking out of, you know?
Listen, I wasn't there. I can't confirm it.
You don't even trust your eyes, man. Jesus Christ. My God.
But the UnitedHealthcare Group is now under criminal investigation for Medicare fraud. They plummeted 5%. I think they were down like 13% at one point. The Department of Justice is looking at Medicare fraud within its Medicare Advantage division, and that's right after the interim CEO resigned for unknown reasons. So
Because they know the gig's up. It's
and apparently
UnitedHealthcare.
what's been going on is they like either overcharge or they overdiagnose or whatever because Medicare Advantage is going to pay for it all. There's been mixed reports of like, is that actually a thing? I don't know if you have any insight into that as a medical professional. So I guess the allegation is that so UnitedHealthcare is so they'll put in medical codes for things that Medicare is going to pay out for. Like they'll just tack on more and more medical codes for diagnoses that they may not have even told the patient about when they go to bill insurance.
Okay.
So they're trying to overcharge Medicare Advantage specifically.
You're talking about the Medicare plans where it's like, these are the ones where people opt into the private Medicare plans instead of keeping the original Medicare, right? Yeah. No, I'm not surprised.
Yeah. I'm assuming you don't encounter Medicare very much as an Army doc.
Not a lot. Unfortunately, I don't know if there was more. I think there was a recent change where like it became one of those like you're automatically opted in to like private insurance, or if that's like a state by state thing. I actually have had some patients where they opted into the private insurance where they had actually TRICARE for life and Medicare initially, but then they opted for a private insurance and TRICARE as secondary. And every time it's been a complete disaster just because like the private insurance, every time I deal with it is a level of denial and a level of attrition that is borderline is disgusting. It's disturbing how like they're able to do it and no one's going to stop them. I actually do have one patient. She has this chronic migraine disorder, which, you know, all these different medications, they don't help, and it's well documented. This is all in her medical record. But after turning 65, you know, they denied all her normal Botox injections, which help for migraines, for no reason, like for literally zero reason. And again, I don't know about you guys, and I don't have migraines myself, but I have a feeling that getting on the phone call with an insurance company is going to set off a migraine.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So,
That sounds miserable.
well, and then there you go. It's miserable to get on the phone and talk to these people to cover something so you won't be miserable talking to them. So I feel like it's a one-sided fight there.
Well, it's like
I fully agree.
it's like in the weeks after the shooting with the UnitedHealthcare CEO, somebody got arrested because their claim with UnitedHealthcare got denied and they were on the phone with the insurance company, and she ended up saying over the phone to the rep, "You're next."
I don't know if she said you're next, but she definitely like she said a bunch of things that like anyone could easily like anyone can interpret it like this could be a threat. I mean,
Yeah.
especially based on what just happened.
Right.
I think she was cleared of charges, wasn't she? Because
I think so. Yeah. I mean, it was bogus.
I mean, is any jury going to convict on that? I don't think so.
Well, I mean, the fact that the police like actually carried out that arrest and like what?
That's crazy. You know, it's wild because I fully hear what you're saying with the private versus the public insurance. And I get the impression that some people don't necessarily believe it at first. But speaking as somebody who has experienced both very high-end insurance and also seen the effects of going on Medicaid, it's really just true that the public stuff is oftentimes better than anything you can buy. I remember our father actually was on a fairly good Blue Cross Blue Shield plan. It was, I think, one of the highest plans they had at the time. And when he lost his business, he wound up going on Oregon's version of Medicaid, which is the Oregon Health Plan. And the difference between the two was night and day. Just like you said, The Blue Cross plan, they would frequently deny operations. They would deny medications. They would overcharge. It would take a long time to hit your deductible, even in the case that they did actually cover something. And then going over to the Medicaid plan, everything was just included. It just got done. Doctors would request things and they would happen. Sometimes you wouldn't get it. You would have to get some sort of secondary insurance. Like he had issues with his contacts specifically. Anything to do with teeth or eyes, there were always issues. But the basic stuff that was necessary for him to have a good quality of life essentially was usually covered.
Although on private health insurance, he had a two for one year on heart attacks, where he met his deductible with the first heart attack, and the second one was free.
Oh my goodness, what a deal!
There is a lesson there.
That's great. Yeah, that's pretty much the truth of the matter. Because I also rotate through the Veterans Affairs clinics as well. And the VA is separate from the TRICARE and the Medicaid in terms of like their actual plan. Now, there's a lot of crossover, and like patients, again, they can have multiple plans being like they have multiple plans sometimes. So sometimes they can get one thing or another, and it helps. But I have seen the best and worst of government healthcare. And I will be 100% honest, I would rather take the worst of government healthcare than the best of private healthcare. I do have examples from when I was a medical student working in actually some of the private practice, or not private practice, but like the practices that accepted private insurance out in Oregon, where very often a lot of medications would not get covered for diabetes. Now, diabetes is one of those things where you kind of need to get that shit on fast. You need to get that thing controlled, because the long-term consequences are enormous. You have higher chance of heart attacks, higher chance of kidney problems, higher chance of not being able to lose, like, able to feel your feet, or your legs gonna get cut off, all kinds of different stuff. And there are so many times where the doctor I was working with just would look at him like, oh shit, this guy's UnitedHealthcare. Crap. Where he's just like, look, this is what the guidelines of my society specifically say should be done for you, but your plan will likely deny this just because you have UnitedHealthcare. Now, is the other ones as bad as UnitedHealthcare? Well, certainly not. UnitedHealthcare is probably the worst, but that's just how private insurance is. Now, the worst I can say on the government side of things, I would say the worst for me, at least in my experience, because I don't work with Medicare, Medicaid patients a lot, is the VA. The worst the VA does is, well, before you get this, just make sure you get this to rule out like this before we will approve like a referral to this or this thing. And a lot of the times, even though I look at it like there's a lot more logic to why it's being put in there. So if a patient has like you want to send them to some physical therapy or like a massage therapist or anything like this, it's like, hey, just make sure you get an x-ray to make sure there's not just like a fracture sitting there that you're not addressing. Like, okay, that's pretty reasonable. Or like, hey, before you send them to the neurologist, make sure there's an MRI, because that way they're not just dealing with a freaking tumor and we need to send it to the neurosurgeon. Like, oh, no, that's a reasonable thing to want before. But like, you know, it's slow and it's cumbersome, but there's at least a logic and there's an understanding that as long as you keep checking the boxes and proceeding down the checklist, you will still get care. Now, there's always the tussle about like burn pits and all these other exposures, which require acts of Congress to get coverage for. And that's the downside, is that like, you need acts of Congress to expand coverage for people.
Well, however, weren't the burn pits, that was a result of like the Army putting, like the argument was the Army was putting them in harm's way on the burn pits, right? But they still so was the government not providing healthcare for that specifically, and saying that you had to go, like your injury is not service related, and making them go out and get private healthcare instead of going through the VA? Is that what happened?
Well, I don't know those specifics, but in terms of like the Army Act, the Veterans Association actually like acknowledging and providing coverage and care for these service related conditions. I do believe it required them to actually pass that bill and get that through. Now, because the VA, even though it's a great care, but like it still is like, it mainly is for taking care of you for service related stuff. So if you got your leg blown off, the VA should be the ones making sure that you don't have to pay any money because your leg got blown off. Makes sense, right?
Yeah. You made your
Reasonable.
sacrifice. You paid your leg to the government, so they owe you treatment.
Pretty much.
For dealing with that.
And you can have multiple conditions that are service related, and that can add up, and you get benefits from that. Now, beyond that, I don't know the specifics, because even though I've worked with the Veterans Association stuff, I don't know the ins and outs well as someone who's worked there better or really been fully briefed. I was mainly there for medical training, not necessarily for being a primary VA provider.
Well, it's still a more informed perspective than ours, I will say. Now, I don't know if you I don't know if you know this, but Oregon is actually on track to be one of the first states to actually implement universal health care right now.
I did not know that. I've kind of been a long way from Oregon for a long time.
That's right. You've been in Texas, the land of cowboy boots and 10-gallon hats, or so I've been told. Or led to believe.
I mean, it's El Paso. It's not really. El Paso is part of Texas on technicality. It's an extension of New Mexico for some people. Other times it's just like it's its own thing. Like we don't even have the same food.
It does seem very New Mexican in culture. It's past the divide that I would put between like the West and the Eastern Texas. Yeah. I remember when I was in Dallas, they often said that the dividing line between the West, like the West began at Fort Worth, is what I was always told.
I can believe that, yeah.
Right. So, you go Dallas, it's East Coast. You go Fort Worth, and it's West Coast. In a sense, they passed the bill to put together a panel of experts and medical doctors, essentially, to structure a system in Oregon that would then be put up for a vote, I believe, in either 2027 or 2028. So the earliest we would actually get that universal health care, it would probably not be this administration. It would probably be the next administration. But I will say the fact that it's even in process is more than most states can say. I'm aware that certain other states, such as I believe Nevada, was also considering a similar sort of bill. But as far as I'm aware, Oregon's the only one actually moving it forward.
Now, is it... Again, I just need to make sure I'm on the same page. Is this universal health care like a single payer, or is it a public option kind of thing?
That's the question. Right now, Oregon did a classic Oregon thing where they put together a panel of experts to produce a report as to what they should do. So as to what exact structure that takes, it's not fully formed yet. So what they're essentially doing is they put together a committee to determine what should be put on the ballot at such time that they actually vote on it. So it's not clear what the actual outcome of that vote would be.
Okay. I mean, I think you could just take what Medicaid and Medicare is and just like, why don't we just do that?
That's what I would say. That's what I would do. I've had plenty of friends on the Oregon Health Plan. It seems to work fine.
Yeah, they could just extend the Oregon Health Plan.
Yeah.
That would be the simplest implementation.
Right.
Like,
I mean, what they could do instead is they could have like, oh, well, everybody takes this out of their paycheck, kind of like a Medicare, Social Security thing. And
They are dealing with one of the things I was going to mention too is that Oregon has a budget shortfall because of the shift in like federal funding.
That doesn't surprise me. Oregon also did shift from a net payer into the federal government to a net payee in recent years, which has been quite interesting to watch. There was a narrative for a long time that if you were a blue state, typically you were a net payer into the federal budget, just in terms of taxes collected. So they've kind of bucked that narrative to a degree. I don't know how much of that is just down to the fact that we have what's called the kicker here, wherein the economists attempt to divine the future, and if they get it wrong, that extra money goes back to the people. That makes it a little bit harder to save for bad times. So it's not like extra money comes into the budget when they get it wrong to the upside and they think they're going to have more than they actually have.
That sounds about right.
Yep. Government budgeting is wonderful.
Now, I just had a couple other things I wanted to mention that I thought were important over the week as far as the economic world. Coinbase added to the S&P 500. Discover kicked out of the S&P 500. So that means crypto is now in the S&P 500.
Wait,
and one credit card is
hold
not.
on. A credit card company got kicked off the S&P 500?
Well, they're a credit card and payment processing company, but I think part of the reason is they're trying to be merged with Capital One. Capital One's trying to buy them.
All right.
So they'll probably become less relevant.
That makes more sense in my head now.
Interestingly enough, not long after that was announced, Coinbase also came out and confirmed that they had a hacker steal some customer information from them, about 20, and they're demanding a $20 million ransom from the company currently. They're estimating it's going to take something like $400 million in total to fix that issue, by the way. And on top of this, there's also an SEC investigation. The hackers for the $20 million is actually on top of that. So it's interesting how now that the spotlight is on them, all these issues have suddenly come to light. It's not as bad as some crypto companies, though.
And at the same time, like the people putting money into Coinbase, they're not expecting like some steady like growth. These are people with fucking gambling problems.
I believe cowboy investments is what they call those. That's not exactly a cowboy investment.
I don't think people realize what happened to most cowboys in the Old West. Most of them
They do
died.
romanticize it.
Yeah, most of them got
tuberculosis, I hear, killed a lot of them.
An old coworker of mine had a Coinbase account with like 20 grand worth of Ethereum and Bitcoin that somebody hacked his account and drained drained all of it into a different wallet, and there was no recourse through Coinbase. They couldn't do anything about it. He couldn't even get a hold of anyone. Like, there was literally nobody to speak to. It just, they basically said, fuck you. I don't care.
And people wonder why we have a banking system. It's the risk you run when you don't have a bank account that people can have recourse for when something goes wrong.
I mean, yeah, that's, again, probably early on the banks were kind of similar just because, like, if it was a new idea, but banking's been around since what, the freaking Stone Ages?
It depends how you count it, because the earliest bank-like transaction, like the earliest financial instrument, let's call it that I'm aware of, that they have found in the record is a futures contract for, I believe, olives in Anatolia. And this is like, it's BC. You're talking
That's
at
like,
that
are you
point.
Talking like freaking Abbasid Empire level crap?
It's old. It's essentially, a stone tablet or something where some farmer was like, I agree to give you this amount of olives when my season is over if you give me money now at this price, which is essentially all a futures contract is. It's a right to receive goods in the future for a predetermined price, which is good for the farmer and good for the investor if done right.
And that's
but
like
banks in the modern sense, I mean, you could trace that back to the Templars. Fun fact, Templars have been credited oftentimes with inventing a precursor to the modern banking system, simply for ferrying the funds of pilgrims to the Holy Land and back, because the Templars had this pre-existing network of outposts where they could essentially, instead of the pilgrim taking all that money with him and maybe getting robbed, they basically just took a piece of paper with them and they could withdraw those funds from the Templar institution at their endpoint. But that still isn't really truly modern banking. The real invention of modern banking is when you start having the introduction of the fractional reserve system. And that's where you get some real cowboy banking. The fractional reserve system is essentially just saying to the bank, we got this amount of obligations and we're only going to keep this fraction in reserve and the rest we're going to lend out. And that's fundamentally how banks have operated from their inception almost. But one thing that happened with paper money in particular, when it became more common and each bank would usually issue its own paper currency, their own paper debentures or debts, which would be traded as currency, which is kind of the origin of paper money in the West. And banks realized that they could just print whatever they wanted. And you wind up with these fractional reserve banks where they may only have a fraction of a thousandth of the actual capital on hand to cover their obligations as money they have deposited in the bank, because the smaller that fractional reserve ratio gets, the more profit the bank can make off of lending that money out and keeping the money circulating, which is also why we have limits on the amount of the fractional reserve that banks must keep in a modern banking system. It's to prevent those banks from having not enough capital on hand in the event that they have like a run on the bank or something.
Yeah, and that's to help keep everything stable for everybody. Like, everyone's interested in this. Everyone except that one guy who's on cocaine sitting there like, I bet we can make more money.
Right. He doesn't care about the long-term stability of the system. He just wants the party to never end.
Exactly. Yeah. And so that's like, again, banking has been around a long time and they figured out through trial and error and all this like crazy stuff. Like, okay, this is what works. It ain't perfect, but this is what everyone's agreed is this is what we're going to stick with. Whereas like crypto is still relatively new and people are still trying to find out like, okay, how do we make this work? Because right now we're still in the scam artist phase where people are like, yeah, it's easy money. Like, everyone buy into this, just buy my coin and just sell it and just pull the rug out under people. So it's full of scam artists. So we're still in that phase where like, okay, well, how do we make this work as a actual currency? Because I feel like it eventually will, but it's going to take a lot of time to get there.
I kind of agree with you on that, yeah.
A lot of people refer to it as this like new digital gold. And I do kind of see that argument, but the thing is, I wouldn't necessarily put all my money in gold either, It's like, and arguably gold as a resource doesn't really have a real risk of going to zero, whereas any certain cryptocurrency has a real non-zero risk of being worthless because of a fluke.
Well, there are all those stable coins where occasionally it would turn out they did what the banks did, and they didn't keep enough reserves on hand to handle their redemptions. So suddenly the stable coin wasn't so stable. It's remarkable how often a financial innovation that sticks around after the fact will start out in this kind of phase of being full of, scams, and eventually one of the scams turns out to be a useful innovation, and it's sort of legitimized to a certain extent. We kind of, these days it happens less, but we still, to a large degree, for a lot of human history, the innovations in finance have come from people not necessarily looking to innovate.
Yeah, and like I don't know a lot about like currencies and stuff, but I only know a little bit. But if it was me, and like if you want to start legitimizing crypto, I would probably start like adding it as like a bond option, where it's like, hey, look, well, here's your coin, it's worth this much, and in 20 years it's going to be worth this much, not because you're trying to make money, but because it's going to be stable at that time and trusted by X government. Like, I feel like that's probably eventually going to be the way it'll work to get more stability. I think whatever is going to first attempts it are probably going to be horrible failures, but that's probably the direction it might go.
Reinventing the central currency.
Exactly.
Basically.
Or just like, yeah, just having a more diversified central currency for a country. Like, I feel like that's not a terrible idea, but then again, I don't know jack shit about the bond market, so.
The bond market's fun. You can really leverage yourself in the bond market. I think there's a 5% margin requirement for treasuries.
Yeah, I took one look at it. It's like, oh god, I know nothing about what I'm about to look at.
But the bond traders are fun because they still yell at each other in person on the trading floor.
The fuck?
It's one of those things where the volume is high enough and the volume is low enough and the figures of money being exchanged are large enough that it still justifies a actual physical trading person in the mix. With a lot of equities trading these days, it's a lot of algorithm to algorithm or robot to robot, which is
high frequency trading.
High frequency traders.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're not quite that efficient.
Yeah.
That's someone I can't compete with, and they're constantly one-upping each other.
Speaking of efficiency, our commander-in-chief is he's mad at Tim Cook because he doesn't want him to make iPhones in India. He wants him to make them in America. Now, people point out that labor is like 4x, and I heard someone on CNB was like, well, maybe we ought to just start having child labor. That'll cut costs. Again,
these are people that sniff cocaine in the bathroom. You don't want to listen to these people. Like, I mean, when it comes to India or any kind of trying to onshore stuff, I probably would go with Tim Cook in there, and it's probably more in the long-term interest of the United States to put him in India, honestly.
I would agree.
Yeah.
India's a little bit friendlier.
I see there is a reasonable argument to think that, somewhat reasonable, to explore the idea of manufacturing that is like totally automated. I mean, you could potentially become somewhat competitive, but even then, it's still cheaper to just outsource to markets where the either currency or labor is just creates an efficiency.
Yeah, I don't know if other countries do this. I mean, we've all heard of countries like France. They have their own homegrown industries, classic stuff that, for better or worse, like that's their stuff. We have our bourbon and whiskey that are only from Tennessee and Kentucky. If it was me in charge of everything, again, this is someone who has nothing about finances, barely anything about the global economy, and is simply just
Nick,
like
you are in the chain of succession.
But like what, the 30th, the 300th person, sorry, 30,000th person down the line.
I mean, admittedly, a lot of people would have to die, but you're in there.
That's not good. But like, as someone who's kind of sees it like from outside of the whole like economic system of it, I get the logic though. Like, we should have them built in America. I also see the issue with like, you can't just tell an entire line to just be made in America, because like you can't do that, especially if like, well, how are you going to support it if it's not like financially feasible or anything like that? My dumb idea would just be like, you don't have to make everything in America. You just have to make a tiny portion in the country, like a single factory in some godforsaken hellhole that's dirt cheap somewhere, just to like have some of them.
One sacrificial place.
Well, just to have some like one factory in America, like crank out the phones that happen to be made in America, and the rest can be like done somewhere else. Just so like we have at least some manufacturing put in here, but not necessarily all of it. That way, in case something weird happens, like, oh, now India hates us. All right, well, at least we have something here we can like replicate and scale, and we're not completely like up shit creek. Like, look what happened with medical equipment and stuff when it came to N95 masks, when it came to gowns to help keep people like safe from transmission. When you have everything built like, a different place, that actually is a national security issue because, okay, well, what if no longer we can access China for X, Y, and Z? What if, even if it wasn't like through competition, suddenly aliens invade, they wipe out China? Okay, if all our crap's made over there, we need something over here to at least start responding in some way, something we can take and then replicate and upscale. I'm not asking for everything to be made here. I'm just asking, like, we need to have the ability to have something made here, even if it's like 5 or 10%. Actually, even less than that, because 5 or 10% is a shitload in your guys' world.
Yeah, it is. That's massive.
But
that's
something
more than
one
factory.
Yeah, but something here where it's like, hey, look, they're over there. Shit, we've lost all manufacturing. We're gonna take the factory here. We're just gonna have to like expand it, kind of thing. But that's kind of why I want to hear something like.
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of when I want to hear something like that. It's like you don't need a black or white. You just need something that's a little more like capable of surviving some crazy shock to the system.
Yeah. I mean, you're speaking my language here. It's like some people you hear, they want to go back to the World War II idea of autarky, which is every nation should be fully a self-contained, self-closed ecosystem, which is just not feasible. Some things can't be grown, can't be made in certain countries, so you have to have some level of trade.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you start having disturbing patterns of logic where people want to invade people. So.
Well, yeah, because then it's like, well, I don't need you anymore. So if I don't need you, I could just take that shit and then take everything you got. Now it's mine. Oh my god!
Exactly. I don't care how many people died. It's mine now.
But yeah, like that's what I'm saying. Like that idea is great. Now that we're in the context of what happens when we have the polar opposite of the idea of like a completely offshore like stuff. That idea sounds way more romantic now, but it's still not going to work because exactly what you said is just like, okay, well now we're back to hardcore nationalism and now Europe's going to go to war again with itself again.
I just love Europe going to war again with itself.
Well, we were going to ask some interview questions for you, Dr. Wu, and we actually went through quite a few of them, but I have a couple that I do want to ask. Why did you become a doctor?
To help people?
Yeah.
I mean,
that's fair.
I mean, everyone joins medicine ultimately to care for other people. Except the few that really just want to make money, but they're kind of more obvious. No, I just want to help people. And the question is, from there, it's like, well, why specifically a doctor then compared to like a nurse, compared to like some admin trying to help out? Ultimately, a doctor's job is to be able to take all the information in and render judgment for someone's health. Similar, I always compare it to you bring your car to the mechanic. You need someone there to say, this is what needs to be done for your car, dude. And not you sitting there like, oh, I want my shit replaced and blah, blah. Like, that's one thing. I'm sure some doctors will kind of work it that way too. But if you bring your car in and be like, hey, can you guys fix my car? You have a mechanic there that's spare to like, okay, let's find out what's going on in your car. Let's find out like reasonably, can we fix this and do what we can? And that's the job of a doctor is, okay, someone has health. They're having an issue. What's the problem? How can we reasonably fix this? Whereas a nurse, they have some of that judgment in the moment, but in the overall guiding of like health and care, their job is to normally follow the care plan and not necessarily render judgment on the care plan. Obviously, with many exceptions, because nurses actually are given a lot of empowered like ability to kind of make quick decisions in the moment. An admin is there to support people like me. And the nursing staff, nursing assistants, medical assistants are there to also support it. But nurses and doctors tend to be the central force, like that do the most good within the system to kind of make sure people are getting their care. Now, do we go in there and always give the injection ourselves? No, we're not necessarily doing the care ourselves, but we're actually making sure the care gets done. And that's what I like about being a doctor. In terms of like my career path to why I became a doctor specifically, I'm guessing that might be question number 3 or 4 down the list, I'm guessing.
Feel free.
Other than the military paying for it, I'm interested in infectious disease, and infectious disease in the military is very different than infectious disease in the civilian side.
Really? Did they talk to each other, or what makes it different?
HIV stuff is what you see a lot in infectious disease on the civilian side. You're dealing with a lot of people dealing with chronic infections, HIV, all these things that are like, horrible things that happen that are a result of just like being in terrible health. and or just like complications. Whereas infectious disease in the military, you have that, but it's also like, oh, by the way, we got this exotic thing over in this military base over here, and oh my god, we got to prepare for war over here, so we got to have like make sure all our vaccinated. Like, there's just a lot more stuff you do, and there's a lot more of a footprint that infectious disease has in the context of preparing soldiers for combat in areas, since preventable diseases or preventable stuff like that is actually a major cause of casualties. So infectious disease has to be able to step in as like public health officers as well. And when things are crazy, they have to be able to put the things together. Like, okay, is someone using a biological weapon on us? We got to kind of put things two and two together. So it's a whole different beast.
So in a nutshell, it sounds like you deal with the practical realities and logistics of epidemiology versus in the civilian sector, they may deal with broader prevention and study.
They actually do a lot of epidemiology on the civilian side. Like when we had E. coli outbreaks of domestic stuff, that's the state health departments. This is CDC. That's domestic stuff. That's not the military doing anything like that. Because we keep track of it because we have soldiers, but we're not like taking charge of that and like it's only us. No, the state health departments and public health in general, they have a lot of stuff they do. It's the infectious disease providers that like are at hospitals and stuff. Those ones, they're like, all right, we got another HIV patient coming in who's been they haven't really taken a lot of their stuff, and now they got these horrible infections. You got to try and help them, and also they're not going to listen to you and blah blah. Or they got, this guy got some crazy infection in there in his prosthetic joint. You got to try and fix as best you can. Like, and you're just looking like, oh God, what is this?
It sounds like you wish people would listen to you more often, Nick, is what I'm getting out of this.
It's less like, should they listen? It's like, well, can they listen? Because again, medicine is expensive, like on the surface. Like it seems like it costs a lot of money. And for a lot of these medications that are life-saving, well, yeah, they're expensive because they know you're going to pay for it. So otherwise, they don't pay, they're going to die. So a lot of people are like, well, it's not going to kill me that fast, so I just probably won't take it. So, like, cheap medicines are, people tend to stick to those ones better because it's more affordable. Like, oh, it's not going to burn a hole in my pocket. But if you have some, like, crazy antiviral or antibiotic that just costs a shitload of money and that's the only thing that's going to kill a bug, and your insurance denies it, well, what are you going to do? You going to pay out of pocket for it? You're going to go into debt for that?
I believe they refer to that as inelastic demand.
So now you see why. And that's just also a general reason why I stay in the military is because TRICARE, the goal of TRICARE is not to make a profit. The goal of TRICARE is to provide high quality care with as best attempt as possible to be efficient.
Now,
when in reality, no.
I don't think I quite understand the full, what is TRICARE specifically?
So it is the military health insurance.
It is the military health care.
And it is a single payer, relatively insulated system. Every person with TRICARE, they go through the military doctors or anyone who is affiliated with the military system. So you can be a TRICARE provider, but yeah, it is the Medicaid for all service members, their dependents, and for any service member that earned it through their long-ass amount of service. You don't get it if you're the girlfriend of a service member. I've had that issue.
Is that why they all get married?
So that you think that would be a joke, but when you sit there and be like, oh, by the way, I'm in the Army and like they pay for
I didn't
all
think
my
it was a
healthcare.
joke.
Yeah, and then you got someone like get everything paid. Well, it's also like if you have like it's a great motivation for some people who are like, hey, look, I have a family member with a horrible chronic condition. I need the best care for them. The Army will sit there like, look, dude, you fulfill your obligation in the Army, and the military medicine will take care of your family member no matter what. We will pull out every stop we can. And so, but like I said about the VA, there's a process to a lot of it. It's not as stringent as the VA, so there's a lot more we do. Granted, there's always shifting. There's a lot more flexibility compared to the VA, but we are able to do things. We have access to formularies that no one else has access to. We have access to, like, imagine every high level, like, or Kaiser Permanente in Oregon, Washington State, California, and Washington, D.C., and a little bit of Arizona. It's an HMO. TRICARE is the most extreme example of an HMO without a profit margin, where it's all it's always trying to reduce overhead and trying to maximize care for patients. Now, do we still have to deal with billing and all that stuff? Sure, but the billing is the purpose of just like, you just need to demonstrate utilization, not necessarily that like you're like trying to upcharge, because they're not spending money.
So why doesn't every state in the union just replicate TRICARE individually for like their own universal health care? It sounds like that would work.
Well, because every person that probably like says that is probably shuffled out of the room. Like, again, it's not an efficient health. It's not as efficient as Medicare, I think. Because again, there's a lot of the doctors are given free reign. The whole point is to support the warfighter and their dependents. And so that kind of system is not necessarily something you could have stand on its own, because it's not about efficiency. It's about making sure everyone's tipped up. Like, everyone is ready to go. Everyone's ready and set up.
There's a real incentive behind it that is different from Medicare, Medicaid.
Yes. Whereas the goal of Medicare, Medicaid, yeah, you try and provide as much care as possible, but you still have to like base it on how much people are paying into the system in general.
Does TRICARE, I have to imagine this is a bit different than private insurers or Medicare or something, but do you guys, have you felt any pressure from shortages or cost creep with the trade war and whatnot? Anything of that nature?
Not directly. I think definitely like there's probably a lot of medications that have to come from those like countries that we may have trade issues with that are probably going to have to be like, they're probably slow down in their ability to disperse it along the medical facilities, because like they'd have to negotiate these prices, all this, so they have to buy this stuff and everything. But the DoD or the Defense Sales Agency, it's hard to tell which jurisdiction currently holds control right now. In general, that money, like we pay for the medications. Getting them is one, like paying for them is one thing, and we don't have to worry about that. Now, are we paying them correctly? I don't know if they negotiate the prices or not. I don't know that. If they did, that may be why like there's always some issues. If they don't, that may be why we're able to get it so quick, because they just give us, well, here's the money, just give us some medication kind of thing. I don't know that logistical component of it.
Interesting.
But your ability to provide service has not been really impacted?
No, because when we have the medication on hand, we're just like, all right, we'll have this one. It's like, well, we don't have that. Like, okay, we'll just find a different medication that kind of works the same way.
Oh, okay.
It hasn't hit me because most of the medications like I prescribe, because I'm internal medicine, so a lot of chronic conditions for dependents. So beta blockers like metoprolol are dirt cheap, lisinopril dirt cheap, and Entresto very expensive, but we had some fun stuff with that recently. We're like with some negotiations with Medicare, so maybe that costs better. But I don't deal with the cost. So to provide the medications for them, to get those people, the trade war and all this stuff, I haven't had any issues prescribing these for people, because that's a pharmacy side of things. Now, again, if the pharmacy calls and says like, hey, we can't get this for the patient, we're going to be out for a while, and we don't know when the next shipment for this thing is going to come in, then we kind of go back to the guidelines like, okay, if we don't have this, what can we substitute in for it that we do have available? So Entresto is this great drug. It's incredibly expensive, but it works to help reduce mortality. There are equivalent things to help fill the role of Entresto, like lisinopril. Lisinopril is very cheap, or losartan. These are blood pressure medications that work in the same like part of the goal-directed medical therapy slot that we could just swap in there. That it's not going to be as good, but it's still going to be a significant benefit. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So sometimes we just like, hey, look, that doesn't work. Just find the next thing we could do.
Yeah.
Okay.
That makes sense.
It's all about, we're trying to give you the best odds to live as long as you can. By taking these medications and doing what we say, hopefully we're giving you the best odds. Is it going to work? All we can say is it's probably going to work more if we do this than if we doesn't. That's all we can say. And that's why a lot of people we put them on. Now, granted, I've seen people with insane cardiac conditions. They've had heart attacks, they're horrible heart failure, they got pacemakers in there, their valves are jacked and all this stuff, and they're walking around, you wouldn't be able to tell. Because the medications and they take good care of themselves, the doctors take good care of themselves, they keep close track. Like, it's insane that like until you have seen someone live until they're in their 90s on these medications, you wouldn't believe they're working. But I have seen them again and again, and it's insane.
It's good to hear.
Modern
but
medicine.
Dr. Wu, are you telling me I won't live forever?
No, you will. You are going to die. And unfortunately, I know the future. You're going to hit by a car the second you walk outside, Drew.
You know the specifics?
Exactly.
Oh no!
I do know the specifics. Drew.
Well, thanks to denial, I'm immortal.
Oh, really?
Yeah, of course. I forgot that loophole.
You know what you can't deny? A funeral cost.
Death, taxes, and funeral costs. Some of the few constants.
But that brings me to this day in economic history, and I'm so happy, Nick, that you get to do this with us.
Oh, God, I'm scared.
And first, I have just a few honorable mentions, and then I have some kind of meat, right? Okay, so, and today, since we're recording after the close on the 15th, and we still have a trading day on the 16th, I decided I'd include both days. So, the 1568, Mary Queen of Scots flees to England. 1842, on the 15th, the Oregon Trail begins. Invest in land, they said. You probably won't die of dysentery, they said.
Yeah, that's the best way to
Mostly
sell
accurate.
It's okay.
The
We've
sick-
got Dr. Wu with us. I'm sure he'll
Yeah.
keep us alive on the trail.
That's right.
All those 19th century medication. I'm sure it's great.
I mean, literally, if they just make it to a freshwater source or like a source where they can just boil enough water to keep your fluids going, you'll probably actually survive dysentery back then.
But Dr. Wu, I don't believe in germ theory.
Well, even if you were drinking shitty water, you're still drinking water. So you're going to last a lot better than some guy sitting there jamming like herbs in his mouth and praying to God it works.
May 16th, 1866, the U.S. nickel debuts because 5 pennies stacked together was just too inefficient.
Talk about getting rid of the nickel, by the way. It's
Yeah.
up there with the penny is costing more to produce than it's worth.
As a numismatic enthusiast myself, I want to keep both.
What?
You going to bring back the hay penny, too?
Yeah. Look, man, if we ain't using it, we ain't using it.
May 15th, 1905, Las Vegas is born from sand to slot machines in under a century. And May 15th, 1940, the first McDonald's opened, and despite the McRib, Warren Buffett's arteries sensed opportunity. And so the meat of my stories that I have here for you. So in 1878, the Tokyo Stock Exchange launched, fresh off the Meiji Restoration and fully committed to the vibe shift from feudalism to finance. They decided it was time to get a stock exchange. And the Tokyo Stock Exchange was helped to create, modernize the economy, and give pensioned-off samurai something to do other than glare at moodily at the sea, right? And over the next century, it helped power Japan's rise as a global economic force. But then came the 1980s when Tokyo real estate was so expensive you could trade a parking spot in Ginza for a Manhattan penthouse. Banks were throwing money to anyone who could fog a mirror, and stocks were used as collateral for other stocks, which were used as collateral for even more absurd loans. Then came the 90s. The bubble popped, and it was called the Lost Decade. And they're still dealing with the aftermath. Supposedly, we lost a lot of growth during that period. So
They are growing again, though,
right.
which is good to see. Japan is sometimes underrated for how heavy it hits on the international stage because of that lost decade. People for a long time dismissed them as an investment opportunity.
May 15th, 1911. John D. Rockefeller's Standard Oil had basically turned into the U.S. economy into one giant monopoly board, and he owned everything but the jail. And controlling about 90% of American oil refining, he undercut rivals, strong-armed railroads for exclusive rates, and when regulators came sniffing, he casually restructured into a holding company like a man in a top hat sliding, go directly to jail under someone else's token. And on the 15th, the Supreme Court finally said no, and they used the Sherman Antitrust Act to order it broken into 34 smaller companies, which hilariously made Rockefeller even richer because the stock in those companies soared. And only Rockefeller could be told to break it up and somehow walk away wealthier. The court introduced rule of reason as well, which basically said that monopolies are bad unless they're wearing a tie and not making a scene, in which case they're not unreasonably bad. The justice had dissented, saying that basically gives free rule for monopolies to exist under these circumstances, which was an interesting dissent to read. Interesting take. But yeah, breaking up monopolies generally makes people quite rich after the breakup.
Because they own all the stock.
Yep. It became Chevron, ExxonMobil, and Texaco and all those things that
Well, yeah, because everyone's going to be like, all right, one of these guys is going to come out on top now. So I'm going to put my money here. And you got 1,000 people doing that. And the one person holding all the shares is like, all right, sure,
It
guys.
doesn't matter.
Yeah, I
he
still
wins
win.
no matter what.
Yeah. But on the other hand, like, that was helpful in that it broke up the companies, which is
does.
that's
Right.
the most important part.
released economic productivity that was stagnating.
Right. It's kind of the paradox of monopolies. It's kind of the end state of a lot of individual firms in a truly free market, is they will attempt to create a monopoly. But it's also bad for anybody that holds stock in them. So it's the paradox is you want to form one, but the second you do, you wind up with all these inefficiencies. Have you guys ever heard of the gold-plated water cooler effect? This is a well-defined economic term where a monopoly will effectively start to spend money on stupid shit because they don't get checked by competition. And this is exemplified in the gold-plated water cooler. Why is it gold-plated? Why not? The margins are so good and nobody's undercutting them that they don't have to make any changes. And that's fundamentally why the competition creates value, is because all of a sudden all the firms get much more efficient with the same amount of resources.
Speaking of monopolies, May 16th, 1991, William Sullivan, founder of the New England Patriots, had a simple dream. Go public, raise some money, maybe pay off a few debts, maybe not sell the family yacht. But The NFL, which treats control over its teams like nuclear launch codes, said, "Nah, we're good." And so Sullivan sued, claiming antitrust violations. At one point, a jury awarded him 51 million big ones. But the NFL...
What year was this?
1991.
Okay.
But the NFL appealed and got the ruling tossed because nothing says sporting integrity like legal technicalities to win in court. And in the end, Sullivan got a measly settlement and no team. And meanwhile, the Green Bay Packers remain the only team with public shareholders because they were grandfathered in, and everyone else is still strictly private because, God forbid, fans actually own a part of the thing they scream at every Sunday.
You know, I am a fan of the British model of team ownership. They've kind of got a funnel where the big teams and even like the smallest club teams kind of all started out in the same ways. Oftentimes they're owned by the city, they're owned by the town, they're owned by the players. But that creates a very vibrant ecosystem because they don't gatekeep.
That was the idea with the Green Bay Packers. But, you know, that was a long time ago when they basically couldn't sell the team.
I mean, it's the NFL, man.
Yeah.
You thought monopolies are hardcore, or the sports monopolies, they have sharper knives, and because people aren't really paying attention, they probably could do a lot more.
And all their employees have CTE, so they can't do anything.
Exactly. Can't do nothing if you're brain damaged.
One last story for you guys. May 15th, 1919. On that day, nearly 25,000 workers in Winnipeg had walked off the job by 11 a.m., and the number kept climbing. The city ground to a halt, transit shut down, mail stopped moving, bakeries went dark, even the barbers stopped operating. It was a full system strike, and it was sparked by wage disputes, poor working conditions, and a post-war economy that seemed allergic to fairness. The government panicked, they called in the county mounties, and eventually had horses charging the crowds. And in arrest, violence, and defeat. But the legacy lived on and inspired labor reforms, union protections, and it was one of the rare times that Canadian protests ended with something other than politely worded disappointment.
Mm-hmm. That's the nature of union or wage disputes, and unionization is you don't need to do a lot of it. You just need to do enough the other side's scared. And they're like, all right, fine.
It's a negotiation.
Yeah. Like if you have to have how easy is it for someone to walk off a line? Yeah. Like it doesn't sound easy at all, and it takes a lot of preparation. But once a couple people do it and they show it's as simple as doing it, even if they lose, people are like, well, I'm just gonna do what they just.
They've shown what is possible. I find the union discussions interesting because you can kind of see in micro the potential effects of unionized labor negotiations in the minimum wage. A lot of people argue that, you shouldn't have a minimum wage because it creates dead weight loss and it will cause unemployment. You know, when you look at areas where employees have negotiated higher wages, oftentimes it's a case that no unemployment didn't tick up, which what that implies is there's more of a there's a power imbalance between the workers and the people employing them, such that there's actually dead weight loss in the other direction. In a lot of industries, it can be argued that wages are kept lower than they might otherwise be if the labor and the company were on equal negotiating footing. And you can kind of see that in, like, for example, Seattle, which has like a $23 minimum wage or something crazy like that. And there's not really been much evidence of higher rates of unemployment in Seattle, although it's kind of hard to study.
Well, that's because a lot of these things, they're like, you hear a lot of it in the news and discussions. A lot of it is a labor dispute. And whenever there's a labor dispute, each side is going to try and do everything they can to justify their position, because that's how you do a negotiation. And you try and make it you have to make your case to everybody, because everyone's like, your brand is on the line now. It's spilling out. It's public. And again, like, you don't want other people involved. You don't want people supporting them, your other side. So you're going to do everything you can to convince everyone else to stop supporting them. So if you're in a labor dispute and you have like striking workers, sure, even if you're not necessarily striking, you can at least tell people, hey, look, we're in dispute. If you want to support us, you just stop buying their products. And if you're on the other side, like, hey, these people are abusing their, trust in us. We've been supporting them. How dare they? You want to sue them, you can sign up right now and be a fucking scab. So, but like, that's why whenever I hear public stuff about any like disputes like that, I always take it a huge grain of salt. And even if I side with the unions, I still understand like this is part of the dispute. That is the whole point of getting out there, because a publicly traded company, or not even public, any company relies on making money and products and something they provide, which means if you can disrupt any part of that process, you start having leverage.
Yeah. Now, are you about to start a doctor's union in the Army, Nick? Is that what I'm getting out of this? Are you allowed to even comment on that?
Well, we can't unionize in the Army. We've sold our souls, so that's
Yeah,
just how
there
it
you go.
is.
Okay, well, on that terrible disappointment,
that's a whole different discussion. It's brief, but it's a whole different discussion. I will tell you all that you must delete every part with my face in it. Or I'll sue you for copyright.
allegedly. Okay.
No section in which you're speaking we may use.
Mm-hmm.
Just the ones where you're silent.
Just the ones where I'm
Exactly.
awkwardly looking at the camera or off to the side.
We'll put a black bar over your eyes, like in one of those expose films or something like that. 30 minutes,
Yeah.
anonymize you.
Yeah. I mean, I know there's probably going to be at one point you'll talk about AI. I can always talk to you like how AI might affect me, but
Ooh.
that's a long
That's a
conversation.
juicy topic for you to bring up near the end of the interview.
Hey guys, Quinn here. We did, in fact, dive into what Dr. Wu thinks about AI and the role of a medical professional and how it affects him as a doctor. Pretty interesting stuff. We actually talked about it for a half hour. So we decided to turn it into another episode 7.5, basically. So go take a look. You might like it, on Spotify, YouTube, wherever you're listening. So thanks, guys. This has been The Capital Call with special guest Dr. Nicholas Wu. I'm Quinn Milligan.
I'm Drew Milligan.
Appreciate you guys having me.
Yeah. Hopefully we'll have you another time soon, and then everybody else tune in next week we'll have some fun with it. So stay liquid.
Stay liquid.